everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be talking about kinks that I've changed my mind about. Now, I don't know about all of you, but one of the things that I love about the kink community is the fact you can always keep learning and growing and exploring new things no matter how long you've been in the community for. I know for myself, I've been in the scene now for around 8 years or so, and I have had so many opportunities to travel, talk to other people, go to classes, go to conventions, read books, listen to podcasts, browse on Reddit, do so many things to learn about different aspects of the kink community, both kinks that I am interested in and things that are super niche I never would have thought of before. And so because of that, my opinions, my perspective is always evolving as I interact with new parts of the community and with old ones that I'm reconnecting to. But you might not get that impression from watching my YouTube channel because I essentially have an archive of all of my opinions from when I was very first in the kink scene to up to today. And I don't always talk about every single kink, every single opinion very often. And so you might not know what I actually think about certain kinks. And so what I want to do here is I want to talk about how and why my opinions have changed over time on certain things, both personal kinks for myself as well as things in the community that I've given my opinion on. And I imagine a few of them might end up being quite surprising. And I'd also love to know, as we're watching here today, if anything comes up while you're listening, I would love to know your thoughts on how your opinions have changed in the kink community over time. And if they haven't, why is that? So let's go ahead and start off with my list. Number one here for a kink I've changed my opinion on would be, and this is risky to say as the first thing I realized on YouTube, but we're gonna go with it, is bloodplay. And this was something I was introduced to actually fairly early on as a term in the kink scene through FetLife, actually, because at the time, this is like pre-FetLife, having some trouble with like credit card processors and sort of a mini adpocalypse on FetLife happening where like a lot of edge play content got removed from FetLife, but that's like a whole other story to maybe talk about in a different video. But at the time, it was very common to see people say in their profiles at the bottom, you know, hard limits, no obvious hard limits, or my hard limits of the obvious stuff, like, and then it would be like blood play, ABDL, choking, that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, what's blood play and why does no one seemingly want to do it? Or like needles would be on there too, or just like specific things you would use as a tool for doing blood play. And I was just like, oh yeah, okay, I don't want anyone to like draw or like play with my blood. That sounds gross. Of course, that's going to automatically be on my hard limits list. And I just like never really thought about doing it, I think, until I went to my first ever Kink Fest and I took a blood play class. There were actually maybe even multiple that were offered that year. And blood play was like super common, you know, compared to what I had seen in my usual kink environment at home. And I was like, oh, okay, I kind of like, I want to try it because it seems maybe not as bad as I thought it might be. I didn't have like a phobia of needles or anything. I wasn't afraid of it because of that. It just wasn't really my kink. And actually getting into blood play has helped me be able to do things like get my blood drawn because now it's much more like passé and common. So, you know, it can also be helpful for some people if you're dealing with feelings around that, but it went from being one of my hard limits, not like a kink I do super frequently, but it is something that I do maybe as sort of a soft limit, but not necessarily because I don't like it or don't enjoy doing it. My barrier for who I want to do it with is fairly high. Like, I don't enjoy doing it as pickup play with strangers. It's a very energetic experience for me to do blood play, and so I only really want to do it with partners where it's an emotional part of the relationship and not something we're doing just to like play around and have fun. It's not really my bag for doing blood play, but it is for some people. Next up, we have water sports, and this one is very interesting because it went on kind of a twisty journey when I was discovering and being true to myself with what kinks I was really into. And originally, like bloodplay, water sports was something that was on my hard limits list. I just thought I was never ever gonna do it. You know, it's gross, it's weird, like why would people be into that? And then I learned more about it, especially through pet play, and I was like, okay, we could try that, I guess. And it kind of became a soft limit for a while. And then I had a partner that was really into it. Actually, multiple partners that were really into water sports over time. And then I was like, okay, well, like these people are really into it. Let's try it. Let's do it. And I think initially I was really drawn to it because it seems like a really interesting kink in theory, like when you describe it as an emotional experience, an intimate experience where it's this very high level of degradation and being objectified and feeling disrespected, and it felt like something that could really, really help me get to a deeper headspace with my submission, with my pet play. And I tried it a couple of different ways, and especially the type of water sports where somebody is, I'm going to say this for the sake of YouTube, watering you. My opinion is that's like trying to do it on the beach or doing it in a hot tub. like as far as like a vanilla intimate practice goes. Like it sounds really hot on paper. It seems like a good idea. And then in practice, it's always kind of a letdown. And so I had to reevaluate, okay, do I really, really like this kink and do I want to have it be part of my relationships, or am I doing it because other people like it, because it sounds extreme to do it, like any kind of pressure going on there, like what's happening? And I decided I wasn't really into that version of water sports, and it just sort of like, it's not a hard limit again, but it's not really one of my favorite kinks, and I don't like seek it out. I'm kind of like, I've had the experience, I've tried it, been there, done that. Not my favorite kink, and I'm okay with having that and knowing that information. Okay, next up is an opinion that I have about a kink that I don't have, but other people do. And that would be people calling themselves soft doms or gentle doms. And this was something I actually made a whole video about not too long ago in terms of the history of my channel. And I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. My opinion about soft doms hasn't completely changed. My core opinion of being a little bit reluctant about accepting soft dominance as a standalone term, that's still around. I do still think it is worth evaluating why, as a community, some people really want to make this hard line in the sand between hard dom and soft dom, because I think, from what I understand at least, it was something that came up on social media over the course of the pandemic with people that maybe didn't really interact with the broader community. And my assessment of it has been that a lot of people that use soft dom will still make a delineation like soft dom means gentle, secure, safe, emotionally aware, respectful, yada yada. And hard dom means cold, mean, rude, selfish, unsafe, dangerous. And in reality, a lot of people have started to adopt soft dom, like daddy before it, as a term to signal safety to wannabe submissives in order to essentially trick them into a relationship that might not end up being that healthy. And I don't really think it's easy to say these are the traits of a soft dom versus a hard dom, because I think in their most extreme states, like a pure soft dom and a pure hard dom don't necessarily exist that separately from each other. I think there's way more overlap in style between a so-called hard dom and a soft dom than people I think are always willing to admit. But as I've said, my opinion has changed slightly on this issue, which is I don't think I'm quite so firmly against using the term soft dom. I have heard over the last couple months, especially from people who find it to be a very useful term for their relationships, for finding partners. It resonates with them as a label. And you know what? I'm not the kink police. I don't want to be the kink police. If a label works for you, if it helps you understand who you are and what you want, absolutely feel like you can use it. I am not the arbiter of like what is allowed to be kink terminology. Like, that would be ridiculous. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that, okay? So use the term if you like it. My somewhat reluctant opinion about it is still that I don't think it's always a great idea, but I have noticed in my own verbiage that I do use the term soft dom more, especially when talking about different dynamics, and I can see why it's so popular, and I feel like I gotta get with the times, I gotta get with the program. Younger folks and newer folks in the community are always going to be making new terms, and I think it's generally better to embrace it and make people aware of maybe some caveats or things to be cautious about in that terminology than like saying, no, you can't use that, that's a bad word. Now, this next one, number 4, I'm not sure if it's going to be the most controversial because I have a number of things on here that are probably going to be controversial. This would be my opinion about 50 Shades of Grey. Now, I don't know how much I've talked about this, but I was aware of 50 Shades of Grey before I was ever in the kink community. At the time when the movies were still coming out and when the books were still being released, like I want to say it was maybe the first movie and then the later books were coming out when I was still in college. And it was a really big thing for people, even vanilla people, to hate on this book and this franchise. Like, sporking was a really big thing. People made multi-hour long rant videos about how terrible these books and eventually the movies were. And just, it was a level of disgust and amusement and horror that I don't think has really been replicated except for possibly by some of the Colleen Hoover books, and even that is on a totally different lower level than this. Like, everyone hated these books very, very publicly. And so naturally my opinion before I ever even got into the kink community because of this was like, oh, these books are bad, they shouldn't exist, they're hurting people, they're teaching other people how to do kink in a wrong way, people are going to be hurt very seriously because of these books and these movies, therefore they should not exist. And that was very much the mainline opinion about 50 Shades for over the last decade. Like, these books started coming out over 10 years ago. That's a long time, okay? And in the kink community, we have really maintained a focus on them being a sort of boogeyman. And I hear a lot of people that are older members of the kink scene, that are in their 50s and 60s especially, and older than that will basically say, 50 Shades ruined the community. There's all these wannabe subs and wannabe doms that came in because of 50 Shades, and they ruined the community, and they watered it down, and blah, 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 blah. The reason why that dungeon closed down, the reason why we don't have that party anymore, the reason why we can't have a convention at that hotel chain is because of these, these silly 50 Shades people coming in with their not very kinky kink and making it horrible for the rest of us. And I feel like that opinion is a bit overzealous and I think a bit out of touch with reality. Because being an educator, I talk to so many people that are brand new to the kink scene. And looking at this more in the long term, I think probably within the first 5 years of 50 Shades being out, getting into the movies and stuff, that was really the peak of people discovering kink through that. But as I've said, it all comes out in the wash. And there were people who went to Lovers and got a faux leather paddle and tried it once and never again because they hated it. There are people who started to go to parties because of it and then maybe didn't always behave super well. I'm not saying it never happened, that there weren't people who entered into the scene that then, caused some problems. I'm not saying that that never ever happened, but I'm saying it was a lot less common and it wasn't quite as long of a problem as maybe some people are making it out to be, because I think it's very easy to look at that and go, oh, that's the problem. It's the 50 Shades. It's not, our understanding of good consent is changing, and things that used to be okay are not any longer, or people are getting outed for bad behavior that used to be protected. No, 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 it's the books that are the problem. And it's like, eventually we gotta stop using 50 Shades of Grey as this eternal shield from introspection, whereas a community we're not evaluating our problems because we have this very big boogeyman. And Zoomers who are 18 that are entering the scene right now out of high school or when they're getting into college, they're not coming in because they read 50 Shades of Grey because it came out when they were in elementary school. Like, it's not generally the newer, younger people's pathway into kink, okay? It's just not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a thing. And I know lots of people that will reluctantly admit that they did get into kink because of 50 Shades, because it gave them a window of understanding into who they are and what they want in a relationship they didn't necessarily have before. It enabled them to have a conversation with their spouse, with their partner, to be like, hey, I think I want to try this. What do you think about it? And the people that are in the scene now that got in because of 50 Shades, I think by and large, they are people that immediately saw the stuff online about 50 Shades of Grey being a bad representation and toxic and negative, and they were able to come into the community, educate themselves, realize and separate fantasy from reality, and that book is a book. And you know what? I gotta be honest. They're all great kinksters as far as I know. And also, for 50 Shades, there's way worse erotica out there, y'all, for kink representation. Like, there are actual books that are erotica that sell themselves on being more accurate, being realistic, where 50 Shades is not, and they are worse in many, many capacities, okay? Like, I have erotica review videos every once in a while for that very reason. But yeah, that is something to note. I don't think 50 Shades is ruining the community permanently. Like, come on, let's move on, please. Okay, let's move on here. And speaking of moving on, let's talk about pet play next. So I talked about this in the video I did recently about human pet, so I'm not gonna dwell on this one for too long, but my opinion has changed. Pet play, for those of you who don't know, that was like my gateway kink. That was how I got into the community, why I found it, why I started going to events. And at the time, there was a very specific model for how to do pet play that was presented online. Like, it was very regimented. You usually had to pick out like a specific breed that you were. You had to get certain gear. You had to do certain behaviors and activities. And regardless of whether or not it was more informed by like the gay men's community or like kitten players on Instagram or Tumblr, it was a very specific flavor and model that you were supposed to do. And I felt like I had to do things like go to moshes and do wrestling stuff and chase toys. And I realized over time that that's not really my thing. The way that I most enjoy doing pet play, and it could also be that just originally I liked it and now my tastes have changed as I've gotten older. That's also totally possible. But I think for right now, what I really like about pet play isn't necessarily like I'm an exact breed and I'm wearing this bandana around my neck and I'm doing this, that, and the other. It's like I enjoy having a more organic, playful relationship where I can have sort of like dog girl behaviors, like an anime dog girl, like Korone, like a VTuber, where, there's some vocalizations, there's some barking, there's some whining, there's some pouting, they're sitting on the floor, there's doing certain sort of dog-like behaviors verbally and like, being distracted by squirrels and eating food out of a bowl. I like all of that, but on a more regular basis, I prefer to be more human-y than dog-like exactly or pet-like exactly. I prefer to have something that's more of a hybrid, leaning more towards human than not, because I like being able to vocalize and use my words. I like being able to be on two legs if I want to do that. I like being able to use the human restroom, okay? So it's something that I have evolved over time in terms of my approach, and I realized I didn't have to be this like super social puppy that went to moshes and did that and this, and like I'm glad I got to try that, but I realized I'm kind of more of a home buddy. I'm a lap dog. I want to cuddle up with my person and be with my person. I'm a people dog, not a dog's dog, okay? That's a realization I have made about pet play. And, okay, this one might also be controversial. This is the other one I think, people, there's gonna be hot takes about this. So this next one is another kink that's not mine, but is a kink that I have changed my opinions about. And I don't even know if I can say this word on YouTube anymore safely, and if I can't, I'll just like mute it and we'll figure out a way to help you all understand what I'm talking about here. But is something that I didn't hate it originally. I didn't like think it was bad and toxic and shouldn't exist. And the reason why people do it is to be misogynistic. But I did have some questions. Like I didn't fully get how somebody could, as a man, want to pretend to be a woman and then find that humiliating. Like it didn't click in my brain how you could do that and it not just be super misogynistic on some level, even internally. Like you could be somebody that's like, you know, a proud male feminist and you go to the women's marches and blah, blah, blah. But if you were doing stuff behind closed doors because wearing high heels embarrasses you and wearing pink and being called a girl is embarrassing to you, like that seems like there must be something in there that needs to be evaluated first in regards to misogyny and, you know, feelings about women and why is it humiliating to act like a woman. But I have had opportunities to have more conversations with people that understand this kink on a much greater level than I do. I have an interview I did with Carly DeVille about that. If you want to watch it, it's very, very good. And now I understand how, yes, that can be true for a certain segment of people that do sissy stuff. It's, you know, conservative men that do it because they find being a woman to be embarrassing. Like it's very misogynistic in its nature, but it can also be about having a safe place to explore gender and sexuality and sexual and gender expression. And I think having that space for people, especially men, can be very important because in everyday life, you know, it's a news article when a man wears a skirt to work, even a very work appropriate skirt. So clearly this is something that it's helpful to have a space for, and maybe over time, if and when our culture becomes more accepting of cis men expressing their sexuality and their gender in a more diverse way, like maybe that'll be different. And also I do think it is helpful for people that are trying to understand, you know, their feelings in terms of their gender identity or their sexual orientation and then coming to certain realizations about that through play, because that play is a safe place to explore those feelings that aren't necessarily safe to explore through other more mainstream non-kink outlets. So I definitely understand it more now. It's a little bit more complex than I originally thought. Now, sort of the opposite of my original feelings about bloodplay and water sports have also happened. So with those, I was like, oh, those are a hard limit. I'm never going to be into them. And then I changed my mind. But there's also kinks that I've been very sure were going to be my kink, and then they absolutely were not. And for me, the biggest example of this is waxplay. I was so sure that waxplay was going to be a kink that I loved because it's sensation play, it's sensual, it's romantic, you know, the candles and getting tied up, and like it just seemed very luxurious and emotional. I thought it was going to be like a very different experience. And I had friends and I knew people that were like, oh my gosh, wax play is the best. It's so relaxing. It's so amazing. You're going to love it. Try it, do it. And then I did it. And I was like, oh, this turns my brain in a completely different direction than where I want it to go. There's something about doing wax play that makes my brain go feral. And I don't know what it is. It just instantly gets into my like, I gotta fight this. I don't want to be here. Get off of me. I'm gonna wrestle you. I'm gonna like, it's extreme, okay? I don't know what it is. There's something about the temperature of it and the not being able to know exactly where it's gonna drip and for how long. Like there's something about the combination of the type of sensation, the lack of control, whatever else, that just does something to my brain that most people who do wax play do not sign up for. And it's not like a fun experience unless I'm planning a very particular scene where that like fighty energy is what we're both going after. So wax play, I only really do a solo play, and doing it as solo play I think is like so much better for me personally. It's relaxing, it's enjoyable, it's artistic. I get to just have, it's like it's two different kinks. It's like it's two completely different activities when I do it with a partner versus by myself. I don't know why that is. I would love to know if you're somebody who has a kink where you just have a totally different experience solo versus partnered and you enjoy it more solo. Please help me feel less alone. What's that kink for you? How did you discover it? Let me know the details. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. So those are all the things I've changed my opinion about in the kink community. And on reflection, I do really feel like I'm heading in a positive direction as I move from like newer kinkster to like journeyman kinkster, where, you know, I'm not going in that place of like, you know, I'm getting set in my ways and like there's only one way to do kink, and you know, oh, back in my day we didn't have all these weird new terms and pronouns, or oh, what's going on with that? Like I'm, if anything, becoming softer and more understanding about just how diverse the kink community is in terms of experiences, opinions, preferences, motivations, and I love that about our community. I love that it is so different and you can find people that resonate with your reasons for doing kink and what you enjoy about it. So go ahead and go find those people, and I'm so glad that I hopefully am not yet at least going to become anybody who's like, oh, back in my day, blah, 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 because that would just be very annoying. I feel like I just would not have a fun time. I feel like when you get to that mentality, you're just no longer having fun with it, I think. Now, I do still have some strong opinions about what I think safer practices are, you know, encouraging people to negotiate things, you know, use safe words. I do still have things that I believe fairly strongly, but even within that, I do think there is room for diversity of opinion and for nuance. I think it's like what really makes our community work is having a very big tent with like so many different ways to be part of the community. But yeah, once again, with that being said, that is everything I have to say about the various kinks I've changed my mind about and various things about the community or opinions about it that I have changed my mind on. I would love to know your thoughts in a comment down below. If you have any kinks yourself that you have changed your mind about, your thoughts about the kinks that I talked about here in this video, 50 Shades of Grey, whatever it is, let me know your thoughts and feelings again in a comment down below. If you did enjoy this, if you're not already, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of different kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. A link to that will be down below. If you do already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.